Hey everyone, Duke Nougat 3D here with another mask from my collection, and today I have a mask that I have actually had in my collection for quite a long time, but I have not actually managed to get around to reviewing yet. But nevertheless, here we have my Polish SzR2-50, or more commonly known as the SR-1 Headwound gas mask. I should go ahead and note that the designation SR-1 is entirely fictitious and falsified by the surplus market, as they tend to do with masks they know nothing about. A Polish collector known as Marek, some of you may know about him or know of him. He pretty much set that straight for me. These are designated SzR2-50, and these Polish headwind masks were, I believe, adopted in some variation or another in the mid to late, I want to say 1950s. I'm sure someone will correct me on that if I'm mistaken, and were used well into the 1980s and potentially 1990s. However, do not quote me on that. That is not potentially entirely true, but nevertheless, my example is a very late 1988 dated example made by Phasor. I don't believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is the company, I believe. Anyways, these were a direct clone of the Russian SzR1, I believe it's called. Overall, very much the same in terms of construction and design. However, the colors and the materials are very slightly different. The Russian ones would have their standard mustard brown painted valve hardware and just a more grayish colored rubber. They'd have probably some khaki-ish or brownish Russian fabric for the head tapes and just minute differences like that. But overall, the construction, the general design is overall the same. So again, I really don't have too much info on these. One last thing I should note is that these, as the name would imply, if you didn't guess already, were designed for head wound patients whose bandages on their head would prevent them from making a seal in a normal SZM-51M or MUA gas mask in use with the Polish military at the time. And like I said, these had a couple different variations. This, again, is a later one from the 80s, which featured the lacquered, unpainted metal parts, and I believe earlier ones had a Polish sort of olive drab green paint on the valve hardware, similar to the Russian ones. However, they can still be told apart by the shade of the paint and certain minute differences in materials. So before I ramble on, let's get down into the components of the kit itself. First up is this carrier here, which is actually not correct for this. As far as I know, the SzR2-50 never had its own proprietary carrier. It may have, but I do not know for sure. Just for the sake of continuity, I'm going to say that it doesn't have its own proprietary carrier. However, it may as well could have. But either case, I do not own it, and the closest that I have is this Polish SZM-41M or MUA carrier here, which is a very ugly, garish, but in some ways aesthetic, sort of bluish, grayish canvas material with some very odd aqua green straps. You have this main pole strap here, which obviously detaches these two buckles from interlocking together, and that opens up the entire assembly. I'm probably going to be bumping the camera here, so forgive me. You have this main pouch here, which I do not entirely know what is for. I've seen a lot of people store the hoses in these, which could be what it is meant for when the mask is not in use and it's just long-term storage. The hose could be kept in here. There could be some sort of chemical poncho that may be stored in here. I know the East Germans had something like that. I don't know if the Polish did exactly. This compartment here is obviously for the filter with this little retention strap for the hose and thread assembly here. The Russian ones had sort of a drawstring cinch assembly like on their RSH4 carriers. It's kind of interesting how the Polish did it this way, and it's kind of a little bit better in my opinion. On the bottom, you can't really see, but there are two foam blocks, as opposed to the Russians using wood, inside a couple fabric sleeves, which suspend the filter off the bottom of the carrier so that it does not suck up the fabric and cause breathing resistance. And then here is the portion for the mask, which is obviously meant to fit a SZM-41M or MUA mask, which obviously a SzR2-50 here cannot fit in this, so yeah. One of the thing to notice about the divider here is that there is a small pouch built into this divider here for the anti-fogging inserts, which I actually have here. These are not Russian ones. These are actual Polish anti-fogging inserts that I got from Pixel Productions and one of the lots that he sent me back in the day when I was doing sales and deals with him and whatnot. But anyways, that would just go right in here. I'll just quickly demonstrate that for clarity. I won't button it up or anything because I'm already at a very awkward angle. On the front here of the carrier, I forgot to point out this. There's a little patch here for a little name tag. You could put your issue number and name, and you got a couple of holes right there in the, I believe it's fake leather, could be wrong, to sew that shut and make sure it doesn't fall out because this does tend to slip out very easily. That's pretty neat. And you have this pocket here for some form of decon kit. I do not know what the Polish would have been using. I'm sure someone will correct me. One other interesting thing to notice about this carrier is that the main shoulder strap is sewn sideways like this. That's kind of an interesting feature that I don't really see in a lot of gas mask carriers. So the Polish were kind of thinking in the right direction with that, but you know, it is what it is. Next up here we have the filter, which is an EO14, very common Polish filter. You can see these dirt cheap everywhere. These probably do have their own safety risks to them, but I'm not going to be talking about that. These are a direct copy of the Russian EO14s, and the only difference is the Russian ones are a mustard brown color, and they have EO14 stamped on them, I believe, as opposed to, you know, imprinted into the metal like this. But otherwise, they are virtually indistinguishable, I suppose. Not too much to mention about these. Got nice markings all over, nice plug attached to the bottom. Nothing really to say here. The hose is not the actual original hose that would have been meant for this mask. This is actually a Russian hose because the original Polish hose that I have with this mask has been disassembled and stripped of all its components for various projects of one sort or another. So I'm going to disregard that and just say that Polish hoses would have been the same lacquered finish as on the valve assembly here, and they would have had brown fabric tape as opposed to black like the Russian ones. Just a small thing to mention. I'm going to move all this out of the way so I can get onto the mask itself, because this is a very peculiar and probably my largest gas mask in my collection, one of my largest masks. So as you can see, the design is a basic Schlem Maska style design. However, it fully encapsulates the head all the way down to the neck. You have this foam rubber or sponge rubber neck protector down here, which is sort of a neck brace, I guess you could call it. I'm not really sure what the purpose of this is other than create a better seal and maybe support the head a bit more. And that's my heater turning on, disregard that. So over here you have this bandage made entirely out of the thin rubber material the bottom portion of this hood is made out of. And I'm not going to unroll this, but this would be wrapped around, and then there are two fabric tapes at the end of it to tie it off and secure it around the neck. Turn off my heater here, forgive me. So anyways, you may have noticed these three fabric tapes on the sides of the hood, and these are obviously to retain the hood on the face to make somewhat of a decent seal. I'm not going to demonstrate this again just for time constraints, but just believe me that these would have been tied individually by themselves. So, and there really isn't too much to mention externally. You got your standard lenses, and you got your typical Schlem Maska style inhale-exhale assembly right there. Just overall a very strange mask, and the rubber thickness is very thin around this bottom hood portion, and it's relatively thicker around the top half here where you can see the seam. I will flip over the hood and show you the inside of the mask, and then I will wrap up the video for you guys because it's kind of been a long video already. And I believe there's some markings in here that I'll try to find and show off here. Yes, here we go. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this very well, but right here, this where my thumb is, that is a marking that says 1988. So I assume that is the date of which this one was produced. You got some other serial stamps here. I believe this example is made by Phasor, as I said before. I'm not entirely sure. And then the inside here is interesting because, as you may notice, the TSO tubes are not integrally molded into the face piece. They are completely separate pieces of rubber that have just been stuck on the valve assembly, and there are a couple loops of a couple rubber bands that are securing these in place to the lenses so they're not flopping all over the place and getting in the way, although they kind of do get in the way when you're wearing this just because of how prominent they are. But this is copied directly off of the Russian design, and the Polish did not bother upgrading this feature, so that's pretty interesting to note. So, and it does have lens insert retainers just like normal Schlem Maska style lenses, and that's pretty much it. Very basic mask, nothing to really mention about this design other than the fact that it is what it is. So I will put it back on the head here and give my final thoughts and wrap up the video for you guys. So that has been this overview of the Polish SzR2-50, or some of you may know it as the SR-1. I hope you enjoyed. These are commonly found on the surplus market. These I'm not sure how common they still are. They used to be pretty cheap for a while, and they were often mislabeled as Czech gas masks. But yeah, definitely pick one of these up if you can. They weren't too expensive a while back, and they're pretty interesting masks, although they do take up a considerable amount of space. And they're just kind of interesting to have around. Very peculiar design for a gas mask. But anyhow, that's about it. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them in the comments below. I'm Duke Nuke 3D, and I will see you all later.